Talk show on television. This is Myers Sports of All Sorts with Ken Broo.
Okay, welcome to the show. We're glad you're with us. Please welcome back to the show a man who lives his life in 140 characters. Long before there were late-night tweets from President Donald Trump, there were late-night tweets from WCPO.com's baseball insider John Fay.
How you doing, Ken?
That's all you're going to say?
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Well, let's see what else you got. Sunny skies today. We're going to see about tomorrow, but there were sunny skies today over Great American Ballpark. 7 rookies on this team, including a guy named Rookie. It's the youngest roster in Major League Baseball. Joey Votto remains, Zach Cozart remains, but the rest of this team is very, very young. USA Today has them winning 66 games. Bakota has the Reds finishing with a second worst record in the National League. John, your opinion, best case scenario for your Cincinnati Reds this season?
It seems like I've been writing it all off season, but it's going to come down to the young pitching. If the young starting pitching can be decent, I think they'll exceed expectations. That doesn't mean they're not going to win 90 games. They're probably not going to win 80 games. But I think if the starting pitching that we've been hearing about for so long, if it's better than expected, I think they have a chance to be competitive.
Amir Garrett?
I like
Amir.
Reed,
Robert Stevenson. Are these the people you're talking about?
Yeah, and Garrett pitched. I was up in Dayton yesterday. He pitched. I'm impressed with the kid, and I think the college basketball background will help him because he's played under pressure. It's not like when he goes out there against St. Louis later this week. It'll be the first time he's in a pressure situation. He throws hard. He was very effective yesterday. He had the best spring of those guys, so he won the position. And I think that's a good thing. He went in knowing he had to pitch well to win it. He won it. And you roll the dice with him. I think it's better than trying to bring in a veteran to supplement.
You mentioned the 2 young players. They got 2 of their best young pitchers in the bullpen. They have Robert Stevenson, who's in the bullpen. They have Cody Reed, who's in the bullpen. Stevenson was once the #1 player in the organization. Had a couple of starts last year. Early in the year, they sent him to the minors. His AAA manager called him out, said he wasn't making adjustments to what he'd been told. So Stevenson had that on his resume. And then you have Cody Reed, who looked like can't miss this time a year ago, but then came up midseason, got smacked around. My guess is here they're both parked in the bullpen, right? Because Brandon Finnegan, Scott Feldman, Bronson, whoever they have in the rotation now, these guys are the insurance policies at least starting the season, right?
Yeah, and I think they're going to approach it a little differently. I think Stevenson, if someone gets knocked out early in the first week, you could see Robert Stevenson come in and pitch 4 innings. And I actually think that's a good way to break guys in. If they can have some success in the bullpen, they can transition back to starting. It's going to be in flux, I think it should be. I think these guys you got to give them a little bit of a chance, but if they struggle, you swap them out for another guy. And they do have a little bit of depth there that guys that are prospects and have potential. But, yeah, I think that they got to go on merit. And I think putting Bronson Arroyo in there is a smart move because the guy, frankly, he can take a beating if he has to. Because if you get what happened last year, the bullpen was awful, but a lot of it had to do with the starting pitching, getting short starts one day after another. It wears out your bullpen. You use guys out of necessity. So I think their approach is better. I think the starting lineup's fine. I think the bullpen will be better, but the starting pitching, it's pretty questionable.
Devin Mesoraco starts the season again on the disabled list. Do we know for sure if he's healthy, or is this a case of simply not getting enough at-bats, enough conditioning, enough time in spring training? Because if it's the latter, I'm okay. If it's a health issue or lingering problems with his shoulder or his hip, then there's a real problem. Which is it?
I think he just didn't have enough time to get ready. Obviously, I haven't been out in spring training recently, but all the way up, he felt good, but he never got to. You have to be able to catch 9 innings, and you have to be able to do it on back-to-back days. So he's kind of building towards that. I get the impression that it's a 10-day, 2-week thing, and he'll be up. I think the good news for them is Tucker Barnhart showed that he can be an everyday guy last year. Always been good defensively and hit pretty well last year. So they got some depth, and the Rule 5 kid, Stuart Turner, who they brought in, had a pretty good spring. So. I think they're wise to give him some time after all this, and you don't want to rush him at this point after all these surgeries.
One player I'm pretty excited about, I think you should be too if you're a Reds fan, Jose Peraza had a nice spring. Defense is one thing, hitting is another. This guy, I think, had 275 at-bats last year, hit 324, got on base 35% of the time, and then this spring, 343, They got Scott Schebler in the same deal that brought Peraza here for Todd Frazier. Two of the everyday 8 players for Frazier. Too early to call this a win for the Reds in this trade? Is it too early to pass judgment on it that way?
Yeah, it's probably too early, but I like Peraza too. I think he's actually going to be an upgrade over Brandon Phillips, what he was last year, because of his speed and his athleticism. And I like the top of the lineup. When you got Billy Hamilton, him up there, they're going to be exciting. Now, I don't know how many games they're going to win, but I like that approach. With those two guys hitting in front of Votto, when they get on base, things are going to happen. It's a question of how much they get on base. But Peraza, he just seems to be able to put the bat on the ball, and he showed some pop. And I think some scouts questioned his power. He hit 3 home runs in spring. That's pretty good for a spring.
Joe Sheehan, who writes for a lot of publications, most notably Sports Illustrated, was on 700 WLW with me this morning. He said the days of teams in that division building, clubs building teams that win 88 and 90 games a year are over for the moment because of the Cubs. It's almost like the AL East of the late 90s. Would you agree with that?
I think it's become a really tough division, because if you look at the Cubs, they've done well with their young players that they brought in, but they bought the rotation. You know, they've got a bunch of $20 million a year guys in the rotation that all came from outside the organization. They were fortunate on the trade with Jake Arrieta. But yeah, it's a tough. And the other thing, I don't look at St. Louis as a small market team because of the way they draw. And if you go there, their Banks area is right out in the outfield, and they own it. I mean, they get the revenue from it. So yeah, it's a tough division. I think, you never know how things are going to shake out. I mean, a couple years ago, I thought the Phillies were going to be a dynasty. They won 1 championship. It's tough, but you're not going to win this division by winning 85 games the next few years.
Those days have sailed for the moment. John Fayman on Twitter, now entering his 7th decade of life, and our WCPO Baseball Insider. Thanks for playing along tonight, John. Happy opening day.
All right, happy opening day to you, Ken.